A quiet flight from JFK to London Heathrow turned into a battleground the moment Mrs. Adrian decided she was too important to sit next to a commoner. Her screaming demands to have a black passenger removed didn't just disrupt the service. They exposed a secret that would cost her everything she had spent a lifetime building. But what she didn't know was that the man she was abusing held the power to freeze her assets before the plane even touched the ground. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a story about the most brutal, instant financial karma in aviation history. The first-class cabin of British Airways Flight 178 was a sanctuary of hushed tones, champagne flutes, and the distinct scent of expensive leather. It was a space designed for the elite, the powerful, and the untouchable. Or at least, that was what Beatrice Adrian believed. Beatrice, a woman whose face was tighter than her schedule, and whose diamonds were insured for more than the aircraft itself, adjusted her pashmina. She was the widow of a shipping magnate, a board member of 3 charities she rarely visited, and a woman who hadn't heard the word no since the Reagan administration. She checked her reflection in the darkened window, satisfied that even at 30,000 feet, she looked every inch the aristocrat. She was traveling to London for the annual gala of the Harrow Foundation, a prestigious philanthropic organization where she served as the treasurer. It was a position that gave her access to London's high society, a circle she guarded jealously. "Champagne, Mrs. Adrian?" a flight attendant asked, bowing slightly. "Make it a Bollinger, dear, and ensure it's actually chilled this time," Beatrice replied, not looking up from her tablet. She was scrolling through the guest list for the gala. Duke of Westminster. Check. The CEO of Shell. Check. It was going to be a marvelous evening, provided she could get some sleep. She stretched her legs, relishing the privacy of seat 1A. Then, the disturbance began. The curtain separating the galley from the cabin parted, and a man walked in. He was tall, dressed in a hooded sweatshirt and faded jeans, wearing heavy noise-cancelling headphones around his neck. He carried a battered leather duffel bag that looked like it had survived a war zone. His skin was dark, his hair cropped short, and he had the relaxed, easygoing gait of someone who wasn't in a rush. Beatrice watched, her lip curling slightly, as he scanned the row numbers. He stopped at seat 1B, directly next to her. She waited for him to realize his mistake. Surely he was looking for economy. Perhaps premium economy if he'd saved up. But first class? In a hoodie? The man smiled at the flight attendant, handed over his jacket, and sat down. He pulled a beat-up paperback book from his bag, something about architectural history, and settled in. Beatrice felt a cold prickle of indignation run down her spine. It wasn't just his attire, it was his presence. In her world, spaces were segregated not by law, but by wealth and breeding. You didn't just buy a first-class ticket, you belonged there. And in her estimation, this man did not. She pressed the call button. Hard. The flight attendant, a patient woman named Chloe who had been flying for 15 years, appeared instantly. "Yes, Mrs. Adrian. Is something wrong with the champagne?" Beatrice lowered her sunglasses, her voice a sharp whisper intended to cut through the cabin's low hum. "I believe there has been a mistake." Chloe looked confused. "A mistake, ma'am?" "With the seating," Beatrice said, gesturing vaguely with a manicured hand toward seat 1B. "This gentleman. I believe he is in the wrong seat. Perhaps he got lost on his way to coach." The man in 1B didn't look up from his book, though Beatrice was certain he could hear her. Chloe glanced at the manifest on her tablet. "Mr. Adebayo? No, ma'am. Seat 1B is assigned to him. He is in the correct seat." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Are you sure? Have you checked his boarding pass? It's highly unlikely that someone dressed like that purchased a full-fare first-class ticket." "I assure you, Mrs. Adrian, everything is in order," Chloe said, her smile tightening just a fraction. "Can I get you anything else?" "Yes," Beatrice snapped, her whisper rising to a conversational volume. "You can get me a different seat. Or better yet, move him. I did not pay £6,000 to sit next to someone who looks like he just came from a basketball court." The cabin went silent. The businessman in 2A lowered his Financial Times. The socialite in 3B paused her movie. The man in 1B, Mr. Adebayo, finally looked up. He had kind eyes, deep and brown, but they held a flicker of steel. He removed his headphones. "Is there a problem?" His voice was deep, a rich baritone with an accent that was hard to place. Educated, perhaps American, but with a lilt of something African. "Yes," Beatrice said, turning her body fully toward him. "The problem is that this is a premium cabin. It is for people who value privacy and standards. Your presence here is making me uncomfortable." "I apologize if my hoodie offends you," Mr. Adebayo said calmly. "It's comfortable for sleeping. I assume we're all here to sleep." "It's not the hoodie," Beatrice hissed. "It's you. I know how these upgrades work. You used miles, or you're an employee on a standby ticket. Well, I paid full price, and I demand that the paying customers be prioritized." She turned back to Chloe, who looked mortified. "Stewardess, I want him moved. There must be a seat in business or economy. Move him there. Refund him the difference if you must, but get him out of my sight." "Mrs. Adrian, I cannot do that," Chloe said firmly. "Mr. Adebayo is a ticketed passenger in this cabin. I cannot move him simply because you are uncomfortable with his attire." "It is a security risk," Beatrice cried out, grasping for straws. "Look at that bag. It's filthy. How do I know what's in it? I feel unsafe. As a single woman traveling alone, I feel threatened by this man." This was the weaponization of victimhood, a tactic Beatrice had perfected over decades. She knew that the moment she said the words "unsafe" and "threatened," the crew would have to react. The purser, a stern man named Arthur, approached. He had heard the commotion from the galley. "What seems to be the issue?" Arthur asked. "This man." Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at Mr. Adebayo. "He is aggressive, he is rude, and he doesn't belong here. I want him removed from this cabin immediately, or I will be contacting British Airways corporate the moment we land. I am a gold guest list member. Do you know who my husband was?" Arthur looked at Mr. Adebayo, then at Beatrice. "Ma'am, did this passenger threaten you?" "His very presence is a threat," Beatrice shrieked. "Look at him. He's a thug." Mr. Adebayo closed his book. He placed it gently on the tray table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand up. He simply looked at Arthur. "I haven't said a word to this lady until she addressed me," Mr. Adebayo said. "I'm just trying to get to London." Arthur turned to Beatrice. "Mrs. Adrian, if you continue to raise your voice, I will have to issue you a formal warning. The passenger stays." Beatrice's face turned a shade of puce. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, towering over Mr. Adebayo. "You listen to me," she spat at him. "I don't know who you think you are, or what affirmative action program got you this seat, but you are ruining my flight. I have an important gala to attend. I am the treasurer of the Harrow Foundation. I deal with billionaires. I do not deal with street trash." Mr. Adebayo's expression changed. At the mention of the Harrow Foundation, a curious, almost amused look crossed his face. He reached into his pocket. Beatrice flinched. "He's got a weapon!" she screamed. Passengers gasped. Arthur stepped forward, hands raised. But Mr. Adebayo didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a pair of reading glasses and a sleek, black smartphone. "The Harrow Foundation, you say?" Mr. Adebayo asked quietly. "Yes," Not that you'd know what that is, Beatrice sneered, sitting back down but keeping her distance. It's for the elite. We fund hospitals, schools. We change the world. I know it, Mr. Adebayo said. He tapped the screen of his phone. I know it very well. Stop talking to me, Beatrice commanded. She turned to Arthur. If you won't move him, move me. But I won't sit here. The flight is full, Mrs. Adrian, Arthur said, his patience wearing thin. Please take your seat. The captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Beatrice huffed, crossing her arms. She glared at Mr. Adebayo. You may have won this round because of these spineless employees. But mark my words, I will find out who you are, and I will make sure you never fly first class on this airline again. I have friends in high places. Mr. Adebayo looked at her, his gaze steady. I'm sure you do, Beatrice. But be careful. The air is thin up here. It's easy to fall. How do you know my name? She snapped. It's on the screen. He pointed to the in-flight entertainment system, where Welcome, Mrs. Beatrice Adrian was displayed. She rolled her eyes. Creep. The plane taxied to the runway. The engines roared to life. Beatrice ordered another glass of champagne, downing it in one gulp. She felt victorious in her own mind. She had made her stance known. She had established the hierarchy. But as the plane climbed through the clouds, leaving New York behind, Mr. Adebayo wasn't sleeping. He was typing on his phone. He was connected to the onboard Wi-Fi. He wasn't playing a game. He wasn't chatting with friends. He was logging into a secure server, a server that monitored global banking transactions, a server that managed the assets of a massive holding company called Aurora Global. Beatrice Adrian had made a fatal calculation. She assumed power was visible. She assumed it wore a suit and tie. She didn't realize that in the modern world, true power is silent. And true power was sitting in seat 1B, typing an email that would dismantle her life before she even finished her second glass of Bollinger. At 38,000 feet over the Atlantic, the cabin lights had been dimmed to a soothing indigo. Most of the first-class cabin was asleep, nestled under high-thread count duvets, but in row 1, the war was far from over. Beatrice Adrian had not slept. Her rage, fueled by 3 glasses of vintage Bollinger, was keeping her wide awake. Every time she glanced to her left, she saw him. The man in the hoodie. He wasn't sleeping either. The soft glow of his smartphone illuminated his face. He was typing with a rhythmic, relentless precision that Beatrice found incredibly irritating. "Can you turn that off?" she snapped, her voice slurring slightly. "The light is blinding me." Mr. Adebayo didn't look up. He simply lowered the brightness on his screen by 10% and continued typing. What Beatrice couldn't see was the recipient of his messages. She couldn't see the subject lines, and she certainly couldn't see the logo at the top of the secure document he was reviewing. It was a stylized A, the logo of Aurora Global Holdings. Damien Adebayo was not just a passenger. He was the founder and CEO of Aurora Global, a private equity firm that quietly owned significant stakes in technology, pharmaceuticals, and, crucially, high-end philanthropic ventures. He was a man who avoided the press, preferring to let his money do the talking. He had grown up in a rough neighborhood in Chicago, earned scholarships to MIT and Harvard, and built an empire on seeing value where others saw nothing. He also had a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect. On his screen was a dossier. It had taken his executive assistant in New York exactly 12 minutes to compile it and upload it to the secure server after Damien had texted her Beatrice's name. Subject: Beatrice Adrian, Harrow Foundation profile. Damien scrolled through the PDF. Beatrice Adrian, 62 years old, widow of Gregory Adrian, shipping. Net worth, approx. $15 million, mostly illiquid assets tied up in real estate. Current income sources, a generous stipend from the Harrow Foundation for her role as treasurer, and dividends from Adrian Shipping, a company now struggling to stay afloat. Damien's eyes narrowed as he read the notes on the Harrow Foundation. Primary donor, Aurora Global Philanthropy Arm. Annual contribution, $4.5 million. Renewal due tomorrow. A faint, cold smile touched Damien's lips. Karma wasn't just coming. It was already seated at the negotiation table. The Harrow Foundation was hosting its gala in London tomorrow night to announce the renewal of their biggest grant, the grant from Damien's own company. Beatrice was going there to shake hands, drink champagne, and take credit for the funding that Damien was providing. She was effectively an employee of his charity ecosystem, living off the fat of his generosity while abusing him to his face. He opened a new email draft, addressed to General Counsel, VP of Philanthropy. Subject: Immediate action. Harrow Foundation's message: effective immediately. Suspend all pending grants to the Harrow Foundation. Trigger the conduct clause in our donor agreement. Specifically, Section 4.2, regarding reputational risk and discriminatory behavior by board members. I want a full audit of their accounts, started by 9 a.m. London time. Also contact the Harrow board chairman. Tell him the funding is pulled indefinitely due to the actions of Mrs. Beatrice Adrian. If she remains on the board by the time I land, the audit goes public. He hovered his thumb over the send button. Just then, Beatrice decided she needed to use the lavatory. As she stood up, the cabin experienced a sudden jolt of turbulence. Beatrice stumbled. She was holding a fresh glass of red wine, a Cabernet she had demanded 5 minutes prior. She lurched to the side, and the wine went flying. It splashed across the armrest of seat 1B. It soaked into the sleeve of Damien's grey hoodie, and most disastrously, it drenched the vintage leather duffel bag sitting at his feet. Damien pulled his phone away just in time, but his clothes and bag were ruined. The cabin gasped. Chloe, the flight attendant, rushed over with a towel. "Oh my goodness, sir, I am so sorry." Beatrice righted herself, gripping the headrest. She looked at the red stain spreading on Damien's hoodie. Instead of apologizing, she laughed. A cruel, sharp bark of a laugh. "Well," she sneered, smoothing her skirt, "at least it matches the rest of your look. Messy, unrefined." "You just poured wine on me," Damien said, his voice deadly quiet. He stood up, towering over her. For the first time, Beatrice felt a flicker of genuine fear. He wasn't yelling, but the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. "It was turbulence," Beatrice lied, her voice shrill. "And maybe if you didn't have your bag in the way, I wouldn't have tripped. It's a hazard. I told the stewardess it was a hazard." She looked at Chloe. "Clean him up, dear, and bring me another glass. I spilled mine." Damien looked at the wine soaking into his bag. Inside that bag was a first edition book he was bringing as a gift for his daughter in London, and a laptop containing sensitive data. He looked at Beatrice, who was now checking her makeup, completely unbothered by the fact that she had assaulted a fellow passenger. She had dehumanized him so completely that she didn't even view the wine spill as an accident. She viewed it as his fault for existing in her space. Damien sat back down. He declined Chloe's offer of a fresh shirt. "I'm fine," he said. "Don't worry about it, Chloe. You're doing a great job." He unlocked his phone. The email draft was still there. He added one more line. "P.S. Mrs. Adrian is also currently intoxicated and has assaulted a passenger, me, on BA Flight 178. Ensure airport security is notified at Heathrow for a Level 3 disturbance. I want charges pressed. He hit Send." The message whooshed away, carried by satellite signals to servers in New York and London. Beatrice Adrian settled back into her seat, closing her eyes. She thought she had put the thug in his place. She thought the worst that would happen was a dry cleaning bill she would never pay. She didn't know that she had just destroyed her own life. While Beatrice dozed off, the machinery of Damien's empire began to turn. In a high-rise in Manhattan, a legal team received the email. Panic ensued. Phones began to ring. In London, the chairman of the Harrow Foundation, Lord Sterling, was woken up by an urgent call from his biggest donor's representative. "What do you mean they're pulling the funding?" Lord Sterling shouted into his phone, sitting up in his four-poster bed. "It's Beatrice Adrian, sir," the voice on the other end said. "She's on a flight with the CEO of Aurora Global. Apparently she's abusing him." "She's what?" Lord Sterling went pale. "She doesn't know who he is?" "No, sir. She thinks he's nobody." "Oh, good God," Sterling whispered. "She's going to bankrupt us." Back on the plane, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Other passengers were shooting disgusted looks at Beatrice, but she was oblivious, snoring lightly. Damien cleaned his bag as best he could, then put his headphones back on. He wasn't listening to music. He was listening to the silence of a trap snapping shut. 6 hours passed. The sun began to rise over the Irish Sea, casting a golden light into the cabin. Beatrice woke up feeling groggy and hungover. She rang the call bell. "Coffee, black, and a warm towel," she demanded when Chloe appeared. "We will be landing in 40 minutes, Mrs. Adrian," Chloe said, her voice noticeably cooler than before. "I need you to fasten your seatbelt." "Don't take that tone with me," Beatrice snapped. "I'll fasten it when I'm ready. Where is the man? Did you finally move him?" She looked at seat 1B. It was empty. "Mr. Adebayo is in the lavatory changing his clothes," Chloe said, "since his were ruined." "Good riddance," Beatrice muttered. "Hopefully he stays in there." She pulled out her phone. She wanted to text her driver to ensure the Bentley was waiting on the tarmac. She usually paid for the VIP meet-and-greet service, which allowed her to bypass the main customs queue. She disabled flight mode. Usually, her phone would ping instantly with emails, texts from her assistant, and notifications from her social circle. Today, the phone remained silent. No signal? No, she had full bars. She tried to open her email. Password incorrect. Strange. She typed it again. Password incorrect. She tried to open her banking app to check a transfer. Account locked. Please contact your branch. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Stupid technology, she muttered. She tried to send a WhatsApp message to her assistant, Sarah. Message failed. Then a single text message came through. It wasn't from Sarah. It was from Lord Sterling, the chairman of the Harrow Foundation. "Do not go to the hotel. Do not speak to the press. Come directly to the Foundation office immediately upon landing. We are in a crisis." "What have you done?" Beatrice frowned. "What have you done? What was the old fool talking about?" Mr. Adebayo returned to his seat. He was wearing a fresh white t-shirt and a blazer he had pulled from the bottom of his bag. He looked crisp, professional, and imposing. He sat down and looked at Beatrice. For the first time in 7 hours he smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who has already eaten. "Did you sleep well, Mrs. Adrian?" he asked. "Better than you, I imagine," she scoffed, "considering you smell like a winery." "Oh, I wouldn't worry about me," Damien said, buckling his belt. "I have a feeling my day is going to get much better. Yours, however, might be a bit complicated." "Is that a threat?" she hissed. "No," Damien replied, turning to look out the window as London sprawled beneath them. "It's a forecast." The wheels of the Boeing 757 kissed the tarmac of Heathrow Airport with a gentle thud. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive beast down. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Local time is 7:15 a.m. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off." Beatrice was already unbuckling. She needed to get off this plane. She needed to find out why her accounts were locked and why Lord Sterling was texting her in all caps. She grabbed her Louis Vuitton tote bag and stood up while the plane was still taxiing. "Ma'am, sit down!" Arthur, the purser, shouted from his jump seat. "I am in a hurry," Beatrice yelled back. "I am a VIP." The plane jerked to a halt at the gate. Beatrice stumbled, but caught herself. As soon as the ding sounded, she pushed past the businessman in 2A to get to the door. "Out of my way," she grunted. She stood right at the door, tapping her foot impatiently as the jet bridge connected. She expected to see the smiling face of the ground staff, ready to escort her to the VIP lounge. The door opened. 2 uniformed officers from the Metropolitan Police stepped onto the plane. Behind them stood a tall, stern-looking woman in a dark suit, a representative from British Airways Legal Compliance. Beatrice smirked. Finally, she thought, they're here to arrest the thug. She turned back to seat 1B, pointing a manicured finger at Damien Adebayo, who was calmly gathering his things. "There he is, officers," Beatrice announced triumphantly. "That's the man. He threatened me. He's been aggressive the entire flight. I want him removed and charged." The police officers didn't look at Damien. They looked at Beatrice. "Mrs. Beatrice Adrian?" the older officer asked. "Yes, that's me. Are you here to take my statement?" "We are here to escort you off the aircraft, ma'am," the officer said. "Please come with us." Beatrice blinked. "Escort me? To the VIP lounge? I have a car waiting." "Not to the lounge, ma'am. To the station. We have a report of assault and drunk and disorderly conduct on board a British aircraft." Beatrice's jaw dropped. "What? That's a lie. He assaulted me. He's the one who—" "Mrs. Adrian," the woman in the suit stepped forward. "I am from BA Legal. We have witness statements from the crew and 3 passengers confirming that you verbally abused a passenger, used racial slurs, and physically assaulted him by throwing wine. The captain has requested you be detained." "Lies! All lies!" Beatrice screamed. She looked around for support. Tell them he's a danger." The cabin was silent. The businessman in 2A looked at her and said, loudly and clearly, "You were a nightmare, lady. You threw wine on him." "I saw it too," the socialite in 3B added. "You were awful." Beatrice felt the walls closing in. "Do you know who I am? I am the treasurer of the Harrow Foundation. I demand to speak to your supervisor." Damien Adebayo walked past her. He stopped at the door. The police officers nodded to him respectfully. "Good morning, Mr. Adebayo," the officer said. "We have your statement via email. We'll need a formal signature later, but you are free to go." "Thank you, officer," Damien said. He turned to Beatrice. Beatrice stared at him. The officers knew his name. How did they know his name? "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Damien adjusted his bag, the one with the wine stain. He leaned in close, so only she could hear. "I'm the reason you have a job, Beatrice. Or rather, the reason you had one." He pulled out a business card from his pocket and tucked it into her expensive silk scarf. "Read it when you get your phone back, if they let you keep it in the holding cell." Damien walked out onto the jet bridge, the morning sun catching his profile. He walked with the confidence of a king. Beatrice looked down at the card. Damien Adebayo, founder and CEO, Aurora Global Holdings. Her blood ran cold. Aurora Global. The name was etched on the plaque of the Harrow Foundation building. They provided 80% of the funding. They were the friends in high places she had bragged about. She had just declared war on her own boss. "Come along, Mrs. Adrian," the officer said, taking her arm firmly. Wait, there's been a mistake," Beatrice cried as she was led away, her heels clicking frantically on the floor. I didn't know! As she was marched through the terminal, bypassing the VIP lounge she loved so much, her phone buzzed one last time before the officer confiscated it. It was a notification from a news app. Breaking. Harrow Foundation. Treasurer suspended amidst racism scandal. Major donor Aurora Global pulls $5 million in funding pending investigation. The story had leaked. Damien hadn't just emailed his lawyers. His PR team had tipped off the press. By the time Beatrice Adrian reached the police station, she wasn't just a prisoner. She was a national pariah. But the nightmare was only beginning. The real twist, the one that would strip the very clothes off her back, was waiting for her in the interrogation room. The holding cell at Heathrow Police Station was a stark contrast to the first-class cabin of the Boeing 777. The walls were painted a suffocating shade of institutional cream. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor cleaner, and there was no champagne. Beatrice Adrian sat on a hard plastic bench, her Chanel suit wrinkled, her mascara slightly smudged. She had been processed like a common criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, DNA swab. The humiliation was physical, a visceral weight pressing on her chest. "I demand my phone call," she barked at the custody sergeant, a man named Miller who looked like he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. "You've been granted your call, Mrs. Adrian. Your solicitor is on the line now. Booth 2. Beatrice scrambled to the phone behind the plexiglass. She snatched up the receiver. "Charles, thank God, you need to get down here, immediately. This is a travesty. I want to sue British Airways. I want to sue the police. And I want to sue that man, Adebayo." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Charles Weatherby had been the Adrian family attorney for 30 years. He was a shark in a pinstripe suit, usually unflappable. But today, he sounded shaken. "Beatrice," Charles's voice was strained. I can't come down there." "What do you mean you can't come?" Beatrice shrieked. "I pay you a retainer of £20,000 a year. Get in your Jaguar and get me out of here." "Beatrice, listen to me." Charles cut her off, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The retainer check. It bounced." Beatrice froze. "Don't be ridiculous. The Adrian Trust has millions." "Not as of 8 a.m. this morning," Charles said. "I just got off the phone with the bank. Your assets have been frozen. All of them. The personal checking, the trust, even the offshore account in the Caymans. Frozen. By whom? By the High Court," Charles explained, panic creeping into his tone. "An emergency injunction was filed by the legal team at Aurora Global. They are the primary underwriters for the Harrow Foundation, Beatrice. They invoked the fiduciary breach clause." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. "But that's impossible. They can't just freeze my personal money because of an argument on a plane." "It's not just the argument," Charles said. "Beatrice, when Mr. Adebayo ordered that audit this morning, they found something. They found the transfers." Beatrice's hand went limp. The receiver almost slipped from her grip. The transfers. For 3 years, Beatrice had been quietly moving funds from the Harrow Foundation's charity accounts into a shell company she controlled called Bluebird Consulting. She justified it as expenses and consultation fees. It was how she maintained her lifestyle as the shipping dividends dried up. She thought no one noticed. The books were complex. She was the treasurer. She controlled the narrative, but Damien Adebayo didn't look at narratives. He looked at raw data. They have the logs, Beatrice, Charles continued. They trace the IP addresses. They know you've been siphoning off grant money. Their grant money. They're suing you for $2.4 million as embezzled funds, plus damages. The asset freeze is to prevent you from fleeing the country or hiding the money. Charles, Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling. What do I do? I can't represent you, Charles said, his voice cold and professional now. This is a criminal fraud case now, not civil. And since you have no access to funds to pay me, you'll need a duty solicitor. Good luck, Beatrice. The line went dead. Beatrice stared at the phone. The thug in seat 1B hadn't just called the police. He had stripped her naked. He had looked at her finances, seen the rot beneath the surface, and surgically removed her safety net. Mrs. Adrian? Sergeant Miller opened the door. Your solicitor isn't coming. No, she whispered. Right then. You'll be assigned a public defender. And I have some bad news. The Crown Prosecution Service has authorized a charge of racially aggravated assault. Because of the flight risk and the severity of the financial allegations just faxed over by the fraud squad, bail is denied for now. You're staying the night. Beatrice Adrian, the woman who wouldn't sit next to a black man because he looked unsafe, was led back to her cell. She sat on the hard bench, surrounded by the cold reality of the justice system. She had no money, she had no friends, and for the first time in her life, she had no power. 36 hours later, Beatrice was released on a technicality regarding her health. Her blood pressure had spiked dangerously high in the cell. She was out on bail, but her passport was surrendered, and she was wearing an electronic ankle monitor. She had one goal: the Harrow Foundation. She believed in her delusional state that if she could just speak to Lord Sterling face to face, she could explain. She could blame it on a clerical error. She could say Damien Adebayo had hacked the system. She could charm her way out of it. It was what she always did. She didn't have money for a taxi, so she had to take the tube. The indignity of sitting on the Piccadilly line, squeezed between tourists and commuters, made her skin crawl. She kept her head down, praying no one recognized her from the newspapers. She arrived at the Harrow Foundation headquarters in Mayfair, a beautiful Georgian townhouse that smelled of beeswax and old money. The receptionist, a young girl named Sophie, who usually greeted Beatrice with a terrified curtsy, didn't look up. "I'm here to see Lord Sterling," Beatrice announced, trying to muster her old authority. Sophie looked up. Her eyes were wide. "Mrs. Adrian, you're not supposed to be here. Security!" "Don't you dare!" Beatrice hissed. She pushed past the reception desk and marched toward the double oak doors of the boardroom. She threw the doors open. "Sterling, we need to talk." The room fell silent. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany table was Lord Sterling. He looked aged, his face grey with stress. Around the table sat the other 6 board members, and standing by the window, looking out at the London skyline, was Damien Adebayo. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Beatrice's car. He turned slowly as she entered. "Beatrice," Lord Sterling said, his voice shaking with rage, "how dare you come here?" "I came to clear my name," Beatrice cried, walking into the room. "This man," she pointed at Damien, "is a liar. He provoked me on the plane, and now he's fabricated these financial lies to destroy me because I didn't like his hoodie." Damien didn't shout. He didn't look angry. He walked over to the table and pressed a button on a laptop connected to the projector. A spreadsheet appeared on the wall. "This," Damien said, his voice calm and commanding, "is a ledger of transactions from the Orphan Relief Fund account. This fund is meant to build schools in Lagos, my home city." He highlighted a column in red. "Every month, for 36 months, $5,000 was transferred to Bluebird Consulting. We checked the registration of Bluebird. It's registered to your home address, Beatrice. Beatrice stammered. That was for overhead. Administration. The schools were never built, Beatrice, Damien said, his voice dropping an octave. The room vibrated with his intensity. I went to the site myself 2 months ago. It's an empty lot. I wondered where the money went. I assumed it was bureaucratic incompetence. Until I met you. He took a step closer to her. You sat next to me and told me I didn't belong in first class. You called me a thug. You looked down on me because of the color of my skin. He pointed to the screen. Meanwhile, you were stealing money from starving children who look just like me to pay for your first-class tickets, to pay for your champagne, to pay for your diamonds. The board members gasped. Lord Sterling put his head in his hands. You didn't just insult me, Beatrice, Damien said. You stole from my people to fund your supremacy. That isn't just a crime, it's evil. Beatrice looked around the room. She saw no sympathy. She saw only disgust. Sterling, please, she begged. I've been with this foundation for 20 years. You are fired, Beatrice, Sterling said without looking up. Effective immediately, and we are cooperating fully with the fraud squad. We are pressing charges for the full amount. But I don't have it, Beatrice screamed. It's gone. I spent it. We know, Damien said. That's why we've seized your house, your car, your jewelry, everything. By the time the lawyers are done, you won't even have a suitcase to put your clothes in. Damien walked over to her. He loomed large, not physically threatening, but morally gargantuan. You wanted me to move, Beatrice? You wanted me out of your sight? He gestured to the door. Now you move. Get out. Beatrice stood there, shaking. The reality of her situation crashed down on her. The racism hadn't just been a social faux pas. It had been the catalyst that exposed her entire fraudulent existence. If she had just sat there, if she had just been polite, she might have gotten away with it for another year. Maybe 2. But her arrogance was her undoing. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Mrs. Adrian, one of them said. This way, please. As she was escorted out, dragged from the world of mahogany and power for the last time, she looked back. Damien Adebayo had already turned away. He was talking to Lord Sterling, discussing how to repay the stolen funds from his own pocket so the schools could be built. He had already forgotten her. She was no longer an adversary. She was just a bad memory. But the story wasn't quite over. Karma had taken her money and her status. Now it was coming for her freedom, and the final twist would come from the one person she never expected to testify against her. 3 months later, the trial of the Crown versus Beatrice Adrian began at Suffolk Crown Court. It was the tabloid sensation of the year. The first-class racist who embezzled from orphans to fund her high society lifestyle. The headlines wrote themselves, and the public was hungry for justice. Beatrice sat in the defendant's glass box, looking unrecognizable. Her hair, once a stiff helmet of blonde, was graying at the roots. She couldn't afford her colorist anymore. She wore a simple, off-the-rack blouse provided by her public defender. The diamonds were gone, seized by the receivers. She looked small, frail, and defeated. Her defense was weak. Her lawyer tried to argue diminished responsibility due to stress and alcohol, painting her as a confused widow. But the financial evidence was a fortress. The paper trail of stolen money was undeniable. However, the prosecution had one final witness to call regarding the assault charge on the plane, the incident that started the domino effect. This was the moment that would seal her character in the eyes of the jury. The prosecution calls Chloe Evans, the barrister announced. Beatrice looked up, her eyes wide. Chloe, the flight attendant, the woman she had treated like a servant for 15 years on the London-New York route. Chloe walked to the stand. She looked nervous but determined. She took the oath, her hand steady on the Bible. "Ms. Evans," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the defendant's behavior on Flight 178? Chloe took a deep breath. She looked directly at Beatrice. For years, Beatrice had snapped her fingers at Chloe, complained about the temperature, demanded impossible service, and never once said thank you. Beatrice had made Chloe cry more times than she cared to count. "She was abusive," Chloe said, her voice clear and carrying to the back of the room. "From the moment she boarded, she used racial slurs against Mr. Adebayo. She demanded he be moved solely because of his race, and she threw the wine. It wasn't turbulence. I was standing right there. The plane was steady. She looked him in the eye and threw it." Beatrice gasped. "Liar!" she whispered, but her lawyer hushed her aggressively. "And," Chloe continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "she told me that I was spineless and that she would have me fired if I didn't obey her. But that wasn't new. Mrs. Adrian has been flying this route for years. She treats all the staff that way. We used to draw straws in the galley to see who had to serve her. No one wanted to be near her." The jury looked at Beatrice with undisguised contempt. It wasn't just the money. It was the cruelty, the utter lack of humanity toward people she viewed as the help. Then the prosecutor played the audio. Damien Adebayo hadn't just been texting on the plane. When Beatrice started screaming, he had hit record on his voice memo app. He had captured the entire interaction. The courtroom went silent as Beatrice's shrill, hateful voice filled the air. "I do not deal with street trash. Affirmative action program. You are ruining my flight. Unsafe. Thug." The recording was crystal clear. It stripped away any defense she had. It revealed the ugly, raw hatred in her heart. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was malice. Beatrice put her head on the table and wept. Not for the victims, not for the shame, but for herself. She cried because she had been caught. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. "Guilty," the foreman said. "On all counts: racially aggravated assault, fraud by abuse of position, embezzlement." The judge, a stern woman who had no patience for the abuse of power, peered over her glasses at Beatrice. "Beatrice Adrian, you lived a life of privilege funded by the suffering of others. You viewed yourself as superior, yet your actions were of the lowest moral character. You assaulted an innocent man, you abused staff who were just doing their jobs, and you stole from the most vulnerable children on earth to buy champagne. You are a disgrace to your position and your country." The gavel banged. "I sentence you to 6 years in prison. You will serve a minimum of 3. Take her down." Beatrice screamed as the officers led her away. "I am a lady. You can't do this. I am Beatrice Adrian." The door to the cells slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of justice served. 6 months into her sentence, the world Beatrice Adrian had built for herself had ceased to exist. HMP Bronzefield was a harsh, unforgiving environment, a universe away from the velvet ropes and champagne flutes of Mayfair. Beatrice was no longer the treasurer of the Harrow Foundation. She was inmate 8940. Her days were a grueling cycle of monotony and enforced humility. She worked in the prison laundry, a cavernous room filled with the roar of industrial machines and the stinging scent of chemical bleach. The heat was stifling, clinging to her skin like a second layer of punishment. Her hands, once soft and manicured, constantly slathered in expensive lotions, were now red, chapped, and calloused. She spent 8 hours a day folding grey prison uniforms, surrounded by women she would have once crossed the street to avoid. Now, they were her peers, her roommates, her reality. She had learned to keep her head down. The arrogance that had defined her existence had been chipped away, replaced by a hollow, bitter silence. She received no mail. No friends visited. Even Charles, her lawyer, had stopped taking her collect calls once the appeals were exhausted. She was entirely alone. One Tuesday afternoon, the routine was broken. A guard, a stern woman named Officer Miller, who took a grim satisfaction in barking orders, approached her station. "Adrian, leave the linen. You have a visitor." Beatrice froze, a towel halfway folded in her hands. A visitor? Hope, dangerous and sharp, flared in her chest. Had the appeal gone through? Had a wealthy friend from the gala circuit finally grown a conscience? Maybe it was the press, looking for an exclusive? She smoothed her uniform, trying to muster a shred of her old dignity, and followed the guard. The visitation room was cold, lit by buzzing fluorescent strips. Beatrice scanned the room, looking for a suit, a briefcase, a familiar face from her past life. But the person sitting at table 4 was a stranger. She was a young black woman, perhaps 19 or 20, dressed in a smart blazer and jeans. Her hair was braided neatly, and she held herself with a poise that seemed out of place in the drab room. On the table in front of her sat a thick, leather-bound law textbook. Beatrice sat down slowly, her confusion evident. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy from disuse. "I don't know you." "No, you don't," the young woman said. Her voice was calm, educated, carrying a familiar lilt, an accent that tugged at a memory Beatrice tried to suppress. "My name is Naya. I'm a second-year law student at Cambridge University." Beatrice slumped back, disappointment washing over her. "If you're looking for a case study on fallen women, I'm not interested. I have no money for an interview fee. I have no money for anything. They took it all." "I know," Nia replied, her eyes steady and unblinking. "I didn't come here for your money, Beatrice. I came here to thank you." Beatrice frowned, a flicker of irritation sparking. "Thank me? Is this a joke? I'm in prison. I've lost everything." "It's not a joke," Naya said. She opened a folder lying next to her textbook. Inside was a photograph of a school building, modern, bright, and full of children. "I grew up in the orphanage in Lagos, the one the Harrow Foundation was supposed to be funding, the one you were supposed to be helping." Beatrice looked away, the shame burning her cheeks. The Orphan Relief Fund. The account she had drained to pay for her renovations and designer wardrobe. "For years," Naya continued, her voice hardening slightly. "We didn't have textbooks. The roof leaked when the rains came. We slept on mats on the floor because the beds never arrived. We were told the funding was delayed. We were told there were administrative costs. We suffered, Beatrice. We went hungry because you needed to fly first class." I didn't intend for you to suffer," Beatrice whispered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to her own ears. "It was just numbers on a screen." "But when Mr. Adebayo found out," Naya interrupted, "everything changed. He didn't just expose you. He went to Lagos himself. He saw the empty lot where the school was supposed to be. He saw us." Nia leaned forward. "He repaid every penny you stole, Beatrice. And then he doubled it. He built this school in 6 months, and he established a specific scholarship fund for the students who had been cheated by your greed, a fund to send the brightest of us to the best universities in the world." Nia tapped her chest. "I am the first recipient." Beatrice stared at her. He did that? Yes, Nia said. A small, ironic smile touched her lips. And do you know what he named the scholarship? Beatrice shook her head, a pit forming in her stomach. He calls it the Beatrice Adrian Redemption Scholarship. The air left Beatrice's lungs. He named it after me. Mr. Adebayo has a very specific sense of justice, Nia explained. He said he wanted your name to finally do some actual good in this world, whether you wanted it to or not. He said that every time I pass an exam, every time I succeed, it will be because you were so terrible that he had to step in and fix it. Your legacy isn't your wealth, Beatrice. Your legacy is me. Nia stood up, gathering her books. She looked down at the woman who had inadvertently funded her future through acts of malice. So thank you. Your greed saved my life. I'm going to be a prosecutor, Beatrice. I'm going to spend my life putting people like you in prison, and I'm going to do it using the education you paid for. Nia turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. The door buzzed and clicked shut behind her. Beatrice sat alone in the silence. The weight of the revelation crushed her. Damien Adebayo had won in the most absolute, poetic way possible. He hadn't just defeated her. He had repurposed her existence. He had turned her selfishness into fuel for the very people she had despised. Her name would live on, not on a plaque in a gala hall, but on the diplomas of children she had tried to rob. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped her lips. It echoed off the cold walls. Beatrice Adrian stood up, her joints aching. She walked back to the laundry room, back to the noise and the heat. She picked up a rough, grey shirt and began to fold. For the first time in her life, she realized she was exactly where she belonged. And that is the story of how Beatrice Adrian flew too close to the sun and got burned by the very person she tried to look down on. It's a brutal reminder that character is revealed not by how we treat our equals, but by how we treat those we think are beneath us. Beatrice thought Seat 1A made her royalty, but it was the man in Seat 1B who wore the crown. She lost her fortune, her freedom, and her name, all because she couldn't show basic human decency. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. What do you think? Was Beatrice's punishment enough? Or did she deserve even more? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.